25 years ago, the South African people took the course of history and broke the bonds of colonial. On April 27, 1994, we finally held South Africa's first non-racial democratic election, and the nation delivered a decisive majority to the African National Congress. It is through this election that our beloved President Nelson Mandela assumed the helm with a commitment to build a better life for all South Africans. Today we look back at the road we have traveled and take a stock of what we have achieved while we draw lessons from our mistakes and failings. We have built a nation grounded on equal rights of all citizens, where access to education or economic opportunities is not determined by the color of one's skin, their gender, culture, creed, or sexual orientation. Indeed, we have made progress and faced challenges in our foundational aspiration to build a united democratic South Africa. Our constitution is embraced by all South Africans, advancing the individual and collective rights of people. Our robust Chapter 9 institutions, judiciary and parliament, are critical safeguards to protect these rights. We have improved the representation and empowerment of women in the public and private sectors through our constitutional commitment to non-sexism and gender equality. Our democracy unleashed the creative energies of all people in sports, arts, music, literature, film, and dance, as well as science, technology, and innovation. Although the demon of racism is far from defeated, Although the demon of racism is far from defeated, we have a society that refuses to accept racism as a norm. The lives of the majority of South Africans have improved. In the area of water, in 1994, only 6 out of 10 South Africans had access to clean and drinking water. Today, that figure has increased to nearly 9 out of 10 South Africans. We will continue to maintain water infrastructure and expand access to water for all, while enhancing quality control and management for sustainable use of our water resources. I will ask Ms. Comrade Pelisa to actually elaborate on that at the end. There's more elaboration on the area of water. There's an extra, if I were to call it that way. Housing. Since 1994, we delivered over 4.7 million housing opportunities, which includes free houses that have been built, benefiting over 14 million people. This has meant a massive extension of home ownership, growing the productive assets of our people. In the recent past, we have been hard at work to ensure that we alter apartheid spatial planning by ensuring that more South Africans live closer to economic opportunities. In the area of education, in the 2014 manifesto, we committed ourselves to improving access, equity, quality, redress and efficiency in education, and achieving lifelong learning and skills for all. We have achieved near universal access to basic education for young children aged 7 to 14 years of age. 90% of public schools have become a no-fee paying schools, and learners are benefiting from school feeding schemes and government-subsidized scholar transport. We also subsidize some of the learners in fee-paying schools. This has contributed to the increase in school attendance from 51% in 1994 to 99% today. Today, 9 of 10 adult South Africans can read and write, and an illiteracy-free South Africa is within our reach. The number of learners who pass matric increased from 50% before 1994 to around 78% today, with a major shift in the balance of high performance to school with learners from poor backgrounds. We will continue to build a solid foundation for quality teaching and learning well before grade 12. 98% of children have access to grade R program The number on the area of comprehensive security, the number of individuals on social grants increased from 3 million in 1994 to 17.5 million in 2017, benefiting children, the elderly, people with disabilities and veterans. The Unemployment Insurance Fund has been extended to help most workers, including domestic workers, and benefit payment period has been increased from 6 months to 12 months. Women on maternity leave who paid into the EIF for 13 weeks or more will now be entitled to receive benefits for between 17 to 32 weeks and receive a flat rate of 66% of their salary instead of 38 to 60%. This benefit also extends to LGBTI community. More recently, we introduced unprecedented legislation in South African history, the national minimum wage, which will improve the wages of at least 6 million workers who are currently being paid below the national minimum wage level of 20 rand an hour. This national minimum wage forms part of the broader reforms aimed at achieving a living wage for most South Africans. What is our path going forward? In the area of early education, we will extend the core responsibilities of the Department of Basic Education to include the provision and monitoring of ECD, provide comprehensive package of ECD services like birth registration, social assistance, parenting support, and quality learning, standardize guidelines, norms, and standards for ECD, and set the employment targets in the sector over the next 5 years. We'll develop a plan to take care of the first 1,000 days of human life from pregnancy until 2 years of age, in which the pregnant mother will get good nutrition, be encouraged to stop smoking and drinking alcohol, and undertake antenatal care visits from an early age. The baby will have good nutrition, exclusive breastfeeding, immunization, and growth monitoring. We will work to achieve universal access to 2 years of ECD, which means 2 years of compulsory preschool enrollment for 4 to 5 years old before grade 1. Promote innovation on different models for delivering home and community-based ECD. In the area of comprehensive security, we will define basket of social security benefits that all should have access with the delivery of package of services free from administrative burdens. Address social grants exclusion errors by improving targeting orphans, children aged on farms, remote rural areas, and disabilities. Increase UIF coverage, as currently only on 5% of employed people benefit from this fund. Support child-headed families through social security intervention. Finalize a comprehensive policy on social security that will include low-paid workers and informal traders, as well as pregnancy and maternity benefits schemes. In the area of human settlement, we will work closely with the private sector to develop development projects that bring together economic nodes, human settlement, smart technologies, and public transport that impact on spatial transformation. These include at least one new South Africa city of the future. Transform the property market to promote access to urban opportunities and social integration through access to well-located, affordable housing and decent shelter, thereby reversing urban fragmentation and highly inefficient sprawl. Release land at the disposal of the state for site and service to afford households the opportunity to build and own their homes. Transform the composition and functioning of the property industry and accelerate legislative measures to eliminate speculative behavior, including the establishment of a property sector ombudsman. Improve the alignment of housing provision with other public investments and service provision, including schools, health facilities, and transport networks, complementing more integrated residential, industrial, and commercial development. address the title deeds backlog, along with associated institutional capacity gaps, to ensure that the transfer of title deeds moved with a faster speed than it is up to now. Develop a more coherent and inclusive approach to land by developing overarching principles for spatial development. Revise the regulations and incentive for housing and land use management. In the area of water, we'll continue to prioritize rollout and provision of water infrastructure to ensure availability of clean water to all South Africans. Eradicate basket system and pit latrines in various parts of the country. Review the policy on minimum free basic water to help further cushion the poor. On gender-based violence, we will work with all stakeholders to take forward gender-based violence. Speed up educational programs aimed at offering psychological and social support to vulnerable learners, and work with young children to change social attitudes. Call for stricter bail conditions for and harsher sentences in combating violence against women and children, particularly in the case of domestic violence and sexual offenses. Capacitate and equip the policy and the court system to support survivors of gender-based violence. I beg your pardon. Scale up the network of Tutuzela care centers and other victim empowerment centers for a more effective response to incidents of violent sexual acts against women. And against women and children, reduction of victimization and improved conviction rates and conclusion of cases. On building social cohesion and embrace, this is a new area, on social cohesion. We will fast-track the promotion and implementation of indigenous language programs, including finalization of language legislation in provinces for inclusion in the school curriculum. We will finalize the proposed legislation before Parliament aimed at preventing and combating the hate crimes and prosecution of persons who commit those offenses. The legislation will deal with the hate crimes against persons based on their race, gender, religion, disability, sexual orientation, or albinism. Promote the values of non-racialism, non-sexism through the promotion of arts, culture, sports, and interfaith activities. Train teachers and public servants on how to deal with all forms of discrimination. Organize programs that honor and salute men and women who have earned their title as veterans of wars of liberation. Promote the study of history in school, mainstream gender equality and the needs of people with disability into all facets of planning, budgeting, monitoring and accounting, including performance indicators and targets in government programs. Promote programs that advance media freedom and diversity with a specific focus on community media and on alternative media. Ensure national holidays are celebrated on intercultural basis and are fully inclusive of all South Africans, blacks and whites. In the area of sport, we will implement programming that should happen at the common spaces and public open spaces that will be driven by a national campaign which we call I Choose to Be Active, that will mobilize society to adopt active lifestyles with key accompanying projects like Big Walk and elevation of the observance of National Recreation Day. We will entrench the key programs of sports such as National School Sports System. We will harness the power of sport as a catalyst for development both socially and economically. We will adopt a strategy for pairing of municipalities with the National Sport Federation and to roll out key national facilities in line with the new priorities. We believe that this way we can harness the geospatial advantages of the popularity of codes as per the targeted areas and achieve a lot more with the limited but focused resources. In the area of of gender equality in sport, we will implement women in sport policy to be utilized as a guiding framework to drive the parity. Our march towards the landslide victory at the poll is unstoppable. We have demonstrated through tangible action that the ANC is the only party that can inspire the nation to achieve greater levels of social cohesion and growth. We call on all the nation to join us in growing South Africa to a nation where the vision of a better life for all is a reality. Maybe this is one page. Huh? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chairperson. I think the chairperson will invite other members of the panel, to address the briefing.
Thank you very much. Now, this is an opportunity for us to engage interactively. Yes. It's time for questions. You know your protocol. My name is Mohandli Kungubele from NCA. ENCA. Yourself, sir? How many hands do you have? Is it only you, sir? It's you for now.
Hello. Greetings, leadership and colleagues. My name is Nisa from the Sunday Times. I've got a number of questions, and for interest of time, I'm just going to shoot all of them at once. First of all, Mr. Kungubele, you speak of the celebration of the increase of social grants from 3 million to 17.9 at this point in time. But one would say, in a developmental state, that is not something that should be celebrated. Of course, social services are very important, but if you are in a developmental state, you would rather have them reduced to show that people are depending more on themselves than the state.
Okay.
I mean, what is the answer? And you go on to say you will address social exclusion of people who access kids in farms and stuff like that. And one would say that we are going backwards in the developmental state if we go that route of increasing social rights instead of increasing. You spoke an issue of the focus on the first 100 days on newborns, nutrition, immunization, and mortality growth. Can you please expand more exactly what is it that you're going to do in that? Because I feel it was not expanded more on it.
I mean the 1,000 days?
Yes.
Okay.
How, the practicality. The tools. On education, and I'm glad the Minister of Education is here. Minister, something maybe that was not addressed here. I mean, I'm one who believes the Department of Education has got too much on its hands. For instance, I don't understand why the Department of Education would be involved in issues of procurement on the building of schools, which I think is the function that should be rested on public works, so that education can focus on its core business, which is teaching and learning. Are there talks in that regard, perhaps to shift? I understand that back in the days it was like that, but there was some changes that were made in the educational hands and stuff like that. And also on gender-based violence, you speak of harsher sentences of perpetrators. Also, someone would say that is a reactionary, perspective. What about a proactive, approach to sort of combat gender-based violence, that it doesn't happen at all? Because just focusing on reaction, saying people must be sent as harsher, is not going to address the situation, and perhaps that is why gender-based violence continues to increase. Okay, that's about it for now.
Thanks, Mr. Anyone else? Going?
Bob Adulane, EWN. Deputy Chairperson, when you talk about social cohesion in a country that grapples with xenophobia a lot in the past, I didn't hear anything about trying to address that, because the DA has taken this hard start to the Mayor, Hemin Mashaba, saying close our borders, that kind of hard line. So So what's the ANC's way of moving forward, especially with these elections, because it could be used as an election ploy, and you know how people are reacting in this country, particularly with issues of unemployment, with issues of rising costs. So what happens the ANC going to elections trying to that message? Where are you on that? Thank you.
Seems as if for now there are no hands. Maybe let's deal with the issue of social grant. 1,000 days. What is this animal? You can use your... Yeah. Yes. Oh, no, you can come here. Let's do some aerobics today. Maybe we'll deal with all the, including your education issues.
Okay. I'll deal with the 1,000 days ones. Because our view is that life, which means development, starts during pregnancy. Some of the problems that occur during pregnancy have lifelong bearing, for instance. Say, for instance, if the mother consumes alcohol, then you have alcohol. So there are lots of challenges that, or damages that will occur if you don't deal with day zero. So we're saying from day zero until they are born, there are some life or permanent challenges that would happen if you don't deal even with the first few days. So there are health issues, there are social issues, but we're also saying there are educational issues, not only for children, but also for the parent and the community. That's why it's from day zero. And some of the things that will happen, for instance, even much more earlier, just speaking from education, it's a screening process so that if there are problems where you can remediate earlier before they become permanent. It could be your hearing, so that you know from the word go that the child's going to need hearing aids. Because if you don't work in an integrated manner, classrooms which got 45 children or 40, sometimes you don't pick up that the child has got a hearing problem and remediate in good time. So it's really having an integrated program between health, social development, but also and health and education together. I mean, just without taking too long a Chair, we just had what we called a play-based conference this week. And some of the statistics were quite scary. It was one of the points that I took from that conference was actually on suicide cases. They're saying out of 10 people who would have committed suicide, it's people who had early childhood. 9 out of 10, 1 out of 10 of suicide, of people who commit suicide will be just ordinary, but 4 out of 5 of people who commit suicide, it's people or children who had childhood trauma. And we're trying to understand, and sometimes say trauma that a child sometimes can't even remember. Children were in a war situation, so it's not a trauma where you say it was bad upbringing, but it's really understanding from a very early age what interventions you have to do, because by the time you meet them at 18, you all think that they have overcome the trauma. But if you didn't have zero and tracking them adequately, you will not know that this child was perhaps in a war zone or in a very traumatic environment, and therefore there must be some resistance. So that's where the 0 to 100 come to say from pregnancy you need to be able to work with the mother and also understand all circumstances around the child to also understand how you support them. The one that I wrote about about social development, I hear this point actually all the time to say if you support the vulnerable, you're not developmental. I know of first world countries which have a very strong net. You look at Britain, you even Germany. You get a child, you get a child support grant, you get 3 months leave. So it's even beyond. Actually, Germany even get up to a year's leave if you bearing children. So they have their own reasons to support or to encourage women to have children there, but to make sure that children are looked after over a long period of time. We are in a different environment where we know that the levels of poverty, we have not been able to deal with them. So to really say we are going to be developmental and leave the vulnerable unprotected, it's just not, it's not negative. I find it progressive. Actually, if the state had the means It should even be able to protect young unemployed people, which they do overseas. So you get your grant if you're unemployed, just to make sure that whilst you are sorting yourself as a young person and not finding a job, you have means of living which give you the necessary dignity for you to find means of having a meaningful life, because social grants are just really survival. It's not anything you can say it's to encourage people not to work. I mean, I always sometimes hear people insulting women to say young girls have children because they want a grant. And I said, only a person doesn't bear a child who can even think that will be pregnant for 180. All people, whether the mother of the child, would know that 180 is not worth those cries and other things. It's something else that we have to deal with. So I don't find it as anything progressive. Actually, if we're the means, we should be covering all people who are vulnerable. And that for me will be developmental. And say, what else do we do whilst you're protecting them to give them the necessary skills and opportunities to have a meaningful life where they are not really dependent on grants. On education, I think we agreed. That's why in most provinces, public works is responsible for school infrastructure. Even ourselves nationally, we do whatever infrastructure we do through DBSA. But as a client, you also need education to be in the space, because they will be the ones who know, who will be able to identify where education pressures are. So, and that's what most provinces are doing, public works, to say we need a school here, we need a school there. But without getting into lots of details, because there are still lots of challenges, even with the relationship with public works. I had a meeting with officials from all provinces to say, let's confront it. We have ongoing challenges around infrastructure. Public works is our clients, DBSA is our clients, the costs are very high. We had a school for 4.8 million, and we're not doing the work ourselves, somebody's doing work for us. What are the things that we have to get right? One of the proposals that I still have to take to cabinet, which I'm sharing with you, but it's still a proposal, people say maybe we should look at an education infrastructure unit like Sandra, exclusive for us. They can source out who implements. Whether public works implements the private sector, but we should have a statutory body. It might cost us lots of money to set up another administration when there's public work, something that we have to debate. Some were saying we have to increase the capacity in the DBSA to have a dedicated capacity to help us with infrastructure, because we have lots of challenges there. Ongoing challenges, despite the fact that we're not implementing. We're just the client. There are strange rules in government that you can't take another department to court. So even when public works fails me, I can't do anything. And it's even easier when I source out to the public sector, because I can take them to court, I can fight them. But there are all these things about how we deal with each other in government. So you find sometimes public works, us being a client, sometimes feel that we're shortchanged, but so that there are lots of issues. But I agree with you that education should focus, and I think that's what we're trying to do, should focus on education and other things like sports. Sports is helping us. On arts and culture, Department of Arts and Culture helps us. We have a strong partnership with health on health, like your assessments, your testing. Department of Health helps us. And infrastructure, the partner that is supposed to help us, that's where I think sometimes we experience the problem. But I agree with you fully that education should not play a central role in the implementation of infrastructure, except for identifying where it needs infrastructure and support and developing a plan on infrastructure, which schools have to be maintained when, where do we shut schools, where do we open new schools, and that is our core business, but the rest should go elsewhere.
Thank you. Ms. Mark will be dealing with the proactive approach to LGD. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you very much, Chair. Zingisa from Sunday Times is asking a specific question that talks about we're talking about stricter sentences on the issues of gender violence, and he's saying, is that not a reactionary measure? I think that's the question. probably one should respond by saying, if you take the manifesto of the ANC and looks at what it says about the gender violence, the first part that it talks about is a national plan of action that has to be developed to deal with the issue of gender violence. And for me, that on its own then is not reactionary. And then the second part of the manifesto talks about educational programs that needs to be developed at a younger age for both boys and girls, so that even in schools there is actually education on gender violence and the issues of gender. The issue of the stricter sentences comes very low on the manifesto. Of course, it could be reactionary in the sense that right now the country is facing one of the worst gender violences that we could have seen. But the manifesto itself has got a part that deals with what needs to be done. But then we have to deal with what we are facing right now. Everybody, there's an outcry. And therefore, that's why there's that part that talks about stricter sentences. But it is not the only thing that says this is what we deal with the gender violence. I thought it's critical. But we have to agree, all of us, that women in particular are facing the worst violence, particularly in the hands of their loved ones. Women are being raped, women are being killed, and we have to therefore, as we talk about the national plan, as we talk about the education, what is it that we can do in the interim to make sure that a person out there can see that the government, the government of the day, which is the African National Congress, is actually alive to what is happening out there. And this is why we are saying, whilst we are dealing with all these things, the national plan, which will not say anything to somebody who's being raped today or who's being killed, the education will not say anybody to what is being affected by violence right now. What that woman wants to hear, or that person who is actually facing this now wants to hear, what is this ANC going to do about these people that are killing women every day, that are able to rape these people every day, as if it is normal for them to do that. And you are saying it is important, therefore, that stricter sentences of those that do that must happen whilst everything else is taking place. I thought it's important to put that in perspective.
Thank you very much. Probably to add my little penny's worth, I think Zingisani, Comrade Zingisa. My apology. I think Comrade has explained the issue of intervention. I think she also, in a way, accepted that Zingisa, there's a need to reduce people who are dependent on what we call. The reduction of that number is a positive sign. In other words, you are in agreement, but I think the problem is that you should accept that when people are vulnerable, for them to start working and fending for themselves, that intervention is needed. On the issue of infrastructure, Comrade Angel's also spoken about that. If you check the stimulus, it speaks about dealing with infrastructure in a different way. Issues of capacity to design, to plan, to implement, a commitment of infrastructure fund where different institutions will come together, private, public, your DBSA, your development financial institutions, and so on. The purpose there is to amass various types of resources, from skills and finances. But the approach that the President is guiding is that do it in a more transparent way so that we don't have infrastructure where we sword turning and then we never come back. There's a clear, decisive turnaround with regard to those issues. And even including what Comrade Angel was saying, we've acknowledged the parallel processes and the need to move in a coherent manner to actually unlock the efficiencies that are hidden in parallel approach. I think it was important to... What I also found interesting was this treatise sentences on, there are instances, in health, there's something they call pyrexia. When temperature is an ultra, very high temperature. Normally, temperature tells you the state of the health of a person. So when you see the temperature increasing, you need to check in the body of a person. What is happening? Because it doesn't matter what you do as long as you don't check the root. But when it is pyrexia, whilst you are looking for the cause, the person can die from being burned by it. It means you must directly go to the symptom. So there are such moments in life where the violence is so high that whilst you are building conditions that undermine that attitude, you must eliminate symptoms that are negative. I see Mr. Mvoko and Skosa, yeah? Oh, yes. You raised xenophobia? Yes. Oh, you. We'll take it?
Yes.
Okay, take Mahadev. Thank you. Skosa will deal with the xenophobia.
Sorry, Mom.
Sorry, Mr. Time also.
Thank you very much, Chair. On this issue, I think even the actual coming in of the term was quite a foreign terminology into the rest of South Africa, because we regard people who are in South Africa to be people who have come for various reasons, and some of them would have come legally, others illegally. So our plan moving forward is to make sure that we do continue and in a big way the registration of people who are in South Africa. Because with that, we have learned that, some are here for different reasons. Some of them would have come to develop their skills using our universities, and therefore, because of such scarce skill, they are offered even during the term of their studies to say, remain in South Africa because we need the skill that you have. So such people would not then, be thought of as people who need to leave South Africa. But on the other side, as we look into various categories, the team of the social security that is part of who will also be briefing media throughout the days, will share with you as to what we are doing, because here we also find some who are hiding behind having come to South Africa. They would use, because they understand that we subscribe to certain, countries, kind of what is it, where we have signed with various countries that we cannot just say when somebody has come into the country, we can just take that person out in any way. We have to establish what is happening. It is now a process where such people are encouraged to be registered into the country, but we also are dealing with the criminal elements, because most of the people who conduct, whether you find these violences in taxis, violences where there are these street stabbings and all of that, the critical issue has been where you find that those people do not exist even in the records of the country. So that is why perhaps the team that will be briefing will indicate exactly what is it that we are doing to ensure that whoever is in South Africa gets to be registered. That forms the basis of the overall social cohesion that we are looking at. Because even in looking at the recent occurrences that is happening even in the religious sector in the country, and you pick that some of the leaders happen to have come here not on the initial saying they are pastors or whatever. That is why we have a situation where even the cabinet, in the last cabinet sitting, was saying the Commission for the Religious and Linguistic must be able to bring us those recommendations out of the study so that we can look into to what extent whether it would be government or in terms of the proposals that they would have brought in, to what extent can we find ways to regulate what is happening in the country without infringing on the freedom of religion by such people. Thank you very much. But also, I think Nogawe did come nicely onto the proactiveness and reactiveness in terms of the gender-based violence issues. And we are looking into a program that cuts across all government departments, because the ANC, in terms of the implementation of its programs, also makes the implementation as it happens in government, that there will be implementation across all government. If it is education, what are the programs that need to be done at that early level up to all the other sectors of government. So we're looking at coming into the new administration where we would be having a gender active or proactive even budget when it comes to it, so that all of those sector priorities are looked at and we're able to tabulate them and present to yourselves. Thank you.
Just picking up on available for ANC. Just picking up on what Mr. just said, that the taking of the program is going to cut across all government departments and so on. Here's a difficulty people have with the ANC's gender policy, that it is not about what you say you will do or are planning to do. It is how you behave yourselves that is a problem. That is perhaps the best testimony of
what you think or how seriously you take this issue. Let us take the past couple of weeks, the Polygamy case, which exposed the ANC as an employer that didn't even have proper policies. The Gender Commission this past week told us that they called in, I think, the 6 top political parties in the country to interrogate their gender policies. Although in your books you have a 50-50 zebra system in place, the reality, which is what the Gender Commission found, is that you actually do not mainstream or you do not have proper gender policies in place and do not take the issue as seriously as you claim you do. So there is a huge difference between what you say and how you actually act, including within the organization. I'm not going to go back to rape cases involving former presidents and so on. So that's on the gender issue. Then on another issue of the infrastructure problems within basic education, which the Minister of Education also spoke about. First of all, I'd like to know, just in terms of the proposal that we just spoke about, have you been able to cost it? What it would mean, how much of the program if you were to go, if you were to go that route, and something that's
ministers raise or say they have problems of one kind or the other. When you sit at cabinet, for example, then a decision is taken that you're going to back, let's say, South African Airways. And on the other hand, you have the Minister of Higher Education who cannot deal with the real problem in higher education, which is the missing middle. At what point you have a conversation among yourselves and as a ruling party, then take a decision about what to prioritize instead of waiting for the bureaucrats in Monica Kungube's department to take a decision.
Yes. Okay. When you start. All right? Doesn't matter how start, it's okay.
I'll leave the gender to colleagues, though, the cabinet. But let me share, because having a principle and a policy doesn't say you are a perfect structure. What we should applaud, and I think what is encouraging the ANC, is the fact that women issues are on the table, which does not necessarily say there are no issues. So they're here on the table. And to say because there's a zebra, there's a principle, even in the ANC constitution, the ANC commits itself to a non-racial, non-sexist, and that is important because then it drives even the engagements within the ANC itself. And the fact that it has not perfected its tools towards the implementation of its commitment does not necessarily say it doesn't have a principle, does not have policies to address the challenge. So gender issues are just a huge struggle, both, and we're not, as gender activists, we're not oblivious to the fact that even inside the ANC there are ongoing struggles. And that's why we even organize ourselves as a women's league, that we advocate or fight for women issues both inside and outside the ANC. So we're not a structure only for advocacy of women issues outside the ANC, even within the ANC. Within the ANC itself, in terms of portfolios, there's even a gender committee. That's an acknowledgement that the struggle still continues within the ANC. But I think colleagues will then talk about the other issues. The one that I want to talk about, the cost. As I said, it was a discussion that I had as part of my preparation for the handover report to say in these areas we've worked well, what else do we want to say the fourth government should do in different areas. So this week I was looking at the infrastructure and say these are the challenges that we had. So it does not mean that, I found it quite strange to say in cabinet there will be those who've got bigger voices than others, and I think knowing myself and my age, very few of my colleagues, I'll be intimidated by them if I have to say anything. They have the age advantage and other things. So they can't bully me. So the mere fact that I don't engage with them, it will not mean that others have got bigger voices than others. I don't think it happens in the cabinet. The issue for me is very technical. You don't want to be running to colleagues to say, I've given you 3 schools that have not been built. You want it to be clean and technical. We've agreed that we're going to build 3 schools, so the bureaucrats should not wait for me to go and engage my colleague. If the contract says this school must be completed in 9 months, they are the ones who have issued that contract. If it doesn't happen, they have to act in terms of what the agreement is. So it shouldn't wait for me again as a minister to go to Minister of Public Works and say, Minister, this is not happening. What I'm saying with private sector is clear, it's technical. If this thing is not happening, these are the lines that are there, and it works quite well because you can terminate, you can do the following. So what I think we're proposing as the sector is that we want a very technical, clear exercises, a process that does not wait for collegiality, but that can work technically. In terms of cost, when we're making proposals, I said the cost, whatever proposal we bring should help us, one of the main things, not to only improve delivery, but to also manage the cost. One of the things that were raised by officials from provinces were all implementing 9 departments have their own consultants. They use their own fees, because when the money has been voted in the province, it's really a provincial responsibility. One of the things they were raising that around costs is that every province has got its own standards, how much they pay consultants because of as I say, the freedom to do that. We have our own, then there's the 10th department through DBSA, we have own standard fees. So we're already saying the same school is built at different costs by different provinces. Yes, indeed, if you work in the Eastern Cape, you go, roads are bad, perhaps you have double handling, therefore the costs are more expensive because there are places where big trucks cannot cross, therefore there's double handling, bikes have to come and take material, which increases prices. So that was understood. But we're saying you need one single body that will help us to manage the cost. Right? And that's why we're saying if we form a new SANRA, it means we have to get new offices, so it might be actually a very costly exercise. We're already working through DBSA. Why don't we piggyback on the infrastructure that DBSA has built for ASIDI and perhaps clear out what is the role of provinces, what is the role of national, and therefore what is the role of the DBSA. So because it's a fresh proposal, which still has to be agreed or communicated upon even before we waste time to cost it, the driving point will be to improve efficiency and also to manage the costs. And therefore, if that proposal comes into place, it can be more expensive than the current model that we're using. So costs were at the center, at the heart of it all, but the explain to you louder voices and lesser voices. It's not about it. It's really about having a clean technical process that runs on its own, does not require us to be liaising as colleagues, but it just runs on its own and very technical and clean.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions from Vuyo around the issue of gender. Let me start with the second one that says we do not mainstream gender policy as the African National Congress-led government. And I think that's not necessarily a true fact. I think the report that came from the Commission of Gender it came only last week. And one of the things that it says is that the ANC is ahead of gender balance and allocation of senior roles for women. That it says. And but also we think we need to agree that the issue of gender, it's a debate that we should have as society, because it's not entirely the role of women. When the word gender comes out, people think that that's women. That's not always the truth, and that's something that we need to engage and interact as society and educate each other and make sure that we understand that gender, as the name, is actually a responsibility of all of us, female and male. But also, it's important also to remind colleagues that when African National Congress came into government in 1994, already there was a discussion on the issue of mainstreaming of gender. People will remember that there was Beijing conference, and people went to Beijing, but also in 1996, the ANC government adopted what we called mainstreaming, where we then said every department must have a gender focal point, where in the office of the presidency there was an office that was established called Office on the Status of Women. Now, we might not have done well as much as we would have liked us to progress, but you can't say we are not mainstreaming. We have done. Yes, a lot needs to be done, because policy by its nature is that it is dynamic. As society develops, it needs to be reviewed. So yes, mainstreaming of gender is there. There's focal points in departments on women. There's an office on status of women, which is not the best functioning at this point in time. That's why one of the things that happened after the presidential summit on gender, which took place, that took everybody last year in 2018, one of the big things was that there needs to be a review of gender policy in the country. And my understanding is that the presidency, particularly the Minister of Women, is undertaking that task. There is a review that is being taken on the issue of making sure that that mainstreaming issue is more on. I think the point is that right now, it's not something that we are talking about every day as we used to do back in the days. So it needs to come to the fore. And we talk about the issue of mainstreaming of gender. The second part that you raised, Vuyo, is that how we behave as the African National Congress doesn't reflect the issue. And I think we need to agree that behavior is a subjective issue. How Monji behaves and how I behave and how Sis Angie behaves is subjective. But of course, the behavior of Monji and myself and Sis Angie will reflect on the organization that we belong. But behavior itself is a subjective. It is Monji's behavior, and therefore that is why the African National Congress has taken it upon itself to actually make sure that around the issue of the sexual harassment policy of the ANC now, as an organization, we are busy widely talking about it, interacting with other stakeholders, so that when it comes out as tight and as reflective. Because remember, the ANC is the leader of society. Therefore, we do acknowledge the fact that that sexual harassment policy is not there. But also remember, the sexual harassment on its own that in the society was put together in the Labor Relations Act is actually the work of the African National Congress. Because the Labor Relations Act on its own has got a section there that deals with sexual harassment. And that's ANC that did that. The only thing that you can fault us on is that the ANC as an organization doesn't have that policy, and we are working on it, and we accept. Thank you very much.
I think Ms. Murphy has responded to say, we agree, you are saying, let's implement our policy fully, and we are committed to that. I think that's the principle. Remember, is there anybody else? Because I wanted to, if there's nobody, if there's none, can you make your last comment, and then we close? There are a few things that...
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say to Vuyo, education remains our apex priority. And issues as Comrade NG has elaborated on basic education, it's also issues that we also prioritize when it comes to issues at higher education, issues as they affect our students in the higher education institutions. That committee will also highlight when it comes on the details and progress that has been made. There's a lot of progress that has been made, and that in itself does not mean there are no challenges. There are challenges, and they will outline what they are working on. But as the manifesto is crafted behind Growing South Africa Together, it continues to say, once you have your apex priority, you also need to intervene in certain other areas of growing the economy. So we can't grow the economy, in fact, as we grow the economy, those interventions are looking at, putting better sense into the purse in order to allocate for other of our mandates. So your SAAs and every other thing then would fit in there to say to what extent, which is what we are working on to inform growing our South Africa together. But I just wanted to get into, for instance, the issue of the gender policies as we are working on, just making an example of what sport is doing to deal with some of the matters. I think in the earlier statement we were indicating on some of what we are doing, because critical for us, we want to harness the power of sport as a catalyst for development, both socially as well as economically, because we believe that it has been more focused on the social aspect without looking into the economic one. So bringing that into the fore is also saying there are other sectors of society or the other sectors other than the economic sector departments that can also contribute and can into issues where women get to be prioritized. We are finalizing a women in sport policy so that we can infuse it into the entire transformation program as it unfolds. And fortunately this year we are finalizing a 5-year term which is now going to place each and every one of the federations and bodies that are working to say, to how far have we gone? Why would we have Banyana doing so well and you don't even pay them, whilst you're having your Bafana, even if they play whatever nonsense, and then each and everyone who gets into the field there is assured of how much that match the person is going to get, whilst when you get to your Banyana, they are even, paid peanuts. But it doesn't only happen in your soccer only, it happens across the codes. It is something, therefore, that we need to tie it up, but also job creation has also been a focus point so that we can train our graduates, they get into the system, they are able, because if you look into the administrators, some of them are aging, so it means you can have no administrators in sport. We also are looking into where those who happen to be coaches and every other person, they are also trained on the issues, because we have now some reports of how, be it in schools, teachers, are abusing our kids. In some of the academies, they are abusing our kids. So there is a training that we are putting together so that we can get to those and blacklist those who are doing such ill behaviors to our children as they grow up.
Thank you very much. As we wrap up now, Sis Angie, sit where you're sitting. Sis Angie and Notawe.
Sis Notawe.
Oh, and Sis Notawe. They would like to say some few things which they would have expected them to come. Quickly, in a minute, so that you are able to wrap up.
No, I won't be long. I just thought to amplify some of the commitments that we are making in the manifesto, because the question has been, are you bringing new policies? And our view is that in the past 25 years, we've been able to build a solid framework of build one single system of education, one assessment. So the framework is there, and what we have to be doing as a country is to consolidate on the things that we've really put in place. Amongst others, that's why we are advocating for a very strong integrated ECD program as part of ramping up the work that we do, and that's why in this manifesto we are putting forward quite strongly the issue around early childhood development. It's a way really of turbocharging the system. But some of the problems we confront later in the system are problems that should have been dealt with earlier. We're emphasizing also issues about care and support programs, and that's what we've also been discussing to Cabinet. We say some of the problems already come from your mild barriers to learning. We've not been able to supply our learners with assistive devices if they don't see properly. We know that they don't see properly. We've not been providing spectacles. If you go to African schools, you find at assembly, all children, none of the children is wearing spectacles. And the health studies say 30% of people don't have full vision. So those are the things we're really looking at, and that's why we're putting forward your ICTs, your reading programs. So we're really not advocating for new policies, but we're saying let's ramp up the already existing programs and use other devices like ICTs to enhance and support that work we do. Because I kept on being asked to say, I bring new policies and say there's no policy that we're advocating for, but we're saying let's consolidate, ramp up, and really get the nation to help us to deal with problems that we've identified in the system, and that's what in the manifesto we're pushing for.
Thank you very much. Just to re-emphasize the fact that social transformation is work in progress, is about making sure that we improve the lives of the people of South Africa. And because it is work in progress, remember the people of South Africa that in 1994, when we came to you, we said a better life for all, and we came up with a policy which is called Reconstruction and Development Program. Now we are saying, fast forward 25 years later, grow South Africa. And therefore there's a link on what we are doing. So I want to stress the fact that all of us, we can agree. We can fault the ANC wherever, but we can agree that the lives of the people of South Africa has improved from 1994 to date. We have not done, we could have not done other things that you would expect us to do. But a man in the street knows that the lives have changed. And that's what social transformation is about. And we therefore, as we go to these elections in May, we urge South Africans not to drop the ball, vote the African National Congress, because that's what we want to make sure that we move on with this social transformation program. Thank you.
Thank you, Sis Notau. Ladies and gentlemen, I think a lot of issues have been addressed. You are free at the end to pick whatever victim you want to. Hang on. I know why. I know why. You have already selected your victim. I think there's one or two issues as we close. Is that in the colloquium we had last year and repeated this year, one of the emphasis from facts and figures was how the benefit economically we get from migration. Go to Silicon Valley, more than 50%, if the figures are correct, 100 American people can go anywhere. If you look at the history of South African economy, its anchor, there's a lot of foreign people from outside. In other words, it's a question of consolidating skills. The question in South Africa is, by the way, if I'm not to be controversial, we criticize that South Africa, people who don't add anything to our economy have got easy access. But those who want to add have got a difficult access. Some of the things that national government is actually attending to with regard to. And secondly, on the issue of Africa, if you go, you can Google your African Development Bank. There's a clear vision that African Development Bank have of what they call high fives, light Africa, integrate Africa, industrialize Africa, feed Africa, and concessional loans they give to African countries which are contributing to that program. The point I'm trying to take home is that the future to dealing with the issue of migration challenges in South Africa does not lie in mechanical borders. It lies in the improvement of the entire economy of Africa. Because you would not succeed purely mechanically in the sea of African poverty to be an island of wealth. It's not going to work. So all those things need to be attended to together at the same time. But there's one thing I wanted to provoke Sis Angie about positively. Every time we talk about language competency, I remember in the olden days, although we were born during Bantu education, but our teachers were not Bantu education teachers. That's the luck we have. As a result, in our school, every teacher was a language teacher. If you teach science, you wouldn't get full marks if language is wrong. If a teacher teaches history, you wouldn't get full marks. And that contributed significantly in what we call language competence. Because sometimes you come across somebody got A's in accounting but can't put together a report. And I think those are the things that CCNC is dealing with when it says quality and long life, what to call. Those are some of the issues I thought one wants to make a very quick point on. But however, I think we've tried to address this. But I wanted to close by saying, because this is an official statement of the ANC.
Yes, sir.
Let me read the statement. ANC acknowledges that we made mistake and veered off course. As a nation, we have learned the harsh impact of corruption on society and the economy. We have witnessed the loss of integrity in some of the institutions of state, business, and political and other organizations. We have learned hard lessons about the vigilance needed to stop lawlessness, greed, and selfishness from taking root. We are resolved to work with our people to address this cancer in our society. After a difficult time, we are on the cusp of a new era of hope and renewal. The new dawn is upon us. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Colleagues, thank you very much. If there are requests for one-on-one interviews, we'll entertain that. But also to remind you that these briefings are ongoing every Sunday. We have another briefing this coming Sunday. But also the opportunity, we avail the opportunity throughout the week as we talk about social transformation. Other members of the committee who may not be available for this briefing for one reason or the other and other engagements, we will then make them available to you for one-on-one briefings, because we want to dissect the minute detail of the ANC's manifesto on social transformation. So throughout the week, we are going to be available on all platforms, radio, broadcast. We'll also accept interview requests, and also on print, because that we want to get to the level of detail rather than to deal with just the broader issues. So thank you very much, colleagues, and that brings us to the end of our briefing.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, good morning.
Thank you,
Thank you, good morning.
Ungavumi Mondi, ungavumi. Okay. Let's go.